Alright, I've got one more thing. As we mentioned in the last video, we're going to talk about factory overhead and how to get that over here. There is going to be a separate video where we explain how to calculate the factory overhead and how to determine what that is. But for now, I'm just going to show you the nuts and bolts. How do we take it and move it over from factory overhead into work in process? So to do that, we're going to start. In fact, let's start here in the screen. This is our, if you remember, from the balance sheet. Double click here on inventory. It brings up this report, except we need it for the 30th of March. All right. If you recall, we've got those 10 doors that we've made. We're going to ship those to the customer. Before we do that, we need to include factory overhead as part of the cost of those finished goods. So you can see here on this line, we've got our $1,462 in finished goods. That represents the material. $1,500, that represents the direct labor. So what we need is the factory overhead. You do that simply. Go to Company, go to Make General Journal Entries. We're going to debit the finished goods account. And again, I'll show you later how to calculate the amount. For now, just we're going to say 150. And it's coming out of factory overhead, crediting factory overhead account. Very important. Make sure you have the job name on both lines here. Save and close that. And now we can see our finished goods. It came out of factory overhead. This 150 came out of factory overhead, moved into finished goods. So the goods that we have finished, the cost of those tests right now, those 10 doors, total $1,650. It includes here our material. Here includes our labor. Here includes our overhead. Those are the three components. Now it looks like we have already invoiced this, so we can see, click on here and see the invoice. We've invoiced 10 of those. So that takes that cost out of finished goods and moves it to cost of goods sold, $1,462. What we've got to do now is take out this $1,500 and this $150 and move those to cost of goods sold as well, because those represent the cost of those doors that we've already sold. Now to do that, here it's easy. We say, oh, I've only got one customer. I know this $1,650. That's the cost of the labor and the factory overhead that we haven't moved over yet. But what if you have a lot of customers? Well, if you have a whole bunch, in fact, you can even have multiple jobs for one customer. What we've got to do is modify this report and filter it. There's two filters we need. One is the name. Let me show you that again real quick. Modify report, and then click on the filter tab. The first filter is the name. In our case, we're doing our door buyer job number 2. We also need to select specific transaction types. So there are two transactions we can use. They are the general journal entries, or just journal, and the other transaction is inventory adjustments. Now we may or may not need those, but just in case, we're going to click it. What that's going to show me is everything where the name is actually associated with whatever the transaction was. So in this case, we see finished goods. It's going to limit it just to our general journals or any inventory adjustments related to that job. So now we can see we have 1,650. That's our amount that needs to move from finished goods, because that's where it is, over to cost of goods sold. We do that by going to Company, Make General Journal Entries. We're going to debit our cost of goods sold account for that amount, 1,650. Very important again, make sure that's related to the job still. We're going to credit our finished goods account because that's where it's remaining. So we do that. Again, make sure the name is there. Save and close. And look, it's gone to 0. So we've got 0 in our finished goods for that job. Look at our profit and loss. Now look, here's all our costs over here. So the total costs, I believe I misspoke earlier, the total cost for this job are $3,112. Profit is $1,778. So that's how we apply factory overhead. That's also how we move all the costs, if I can find my screen, moved all the costs from finished goods for this job into cost of goods sold once that was completed. Now the job isn't completed. We still have 20 more doors to invoice, but for the doors that we've done, we've applied factory overhead to finished goods, and we moved all of our costs, factory overhead, and our labor costs over to cost of goods sold. The reason we don't have to worry about moving our direct material costs is because that was done. When we created this invoice, that took those costs out automatically, so we didn't have to worry about those.